Hi everyone, my name's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna do my July wrap up. This was an incredibly good reading month. I read 12 books this month. I normally read around like 8 books a month, but this month I was just flying through books. I think it was just a combination of having a lot of time to read. And now the dog has to drink water as soon as I start filming. That's how it always works. Center of attention at all times. Anyway, I had a lot of time to read. I also was just really loving what I was reading, and I read a few shorter books, so that kind of like filled some of the gaps of some of these huge books I read. So let's get into it. The first book I read this month, I have already lent to a friend because it was amazing, so I don't have it with me. And that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I gave this 5 stars, like, it's amazing. This is a adorable slice of life fantasy story that on the cover says high fantasy, low stakes, and that perfectly describes it. In this book, we follow a orc woman who is a warrior. She wants to give up the warrior lifestyle, and in this one city, she had discovered coffee and the idea of a coffee shop. So she has done a lot of research and wants to go to this small city and open her own coffee shop. And she does that. And it is just a story of her going to this city, meeting new people, opening this coffee shop, and it is so wholesome, so lovely. Travis Baldree's descriptions of food and coffee and environments are so atmospheric, and you feel like you're there with them. He does an incredible job of my favorite trope of a found family, and it is just such a lovely book. It's a quick read. I read it in less than 24 hours. It is lovely, so highly recommend. It was a perfect start to my month. Next up was a buddy read I did with Kushika Shore. I will link her channel down below. Give her a subscribe. She's incredible. She reads a lot of different genres. Definitely worth a look at. And we read Finley, Donovan is Killing It by El Cosimano, and both of us were unimpressed. It wasn't a bad book. It was just unimpressive. It was just kind of a book. It's a genre neither of us read much. We just both heard a lot of talk about this book, so we decided to give it a shot. And it follows Finley Donovan, who is an author, and she's gone through a divorce. She has 2 kids, and she's really struggling to get by. She has to borrow money from her ex-husband all the time, and she is just struggling. And one day she is at a Panera Bread talking to her editor or her agent or whatever, and this woman overhears them talking and mistakes what they're talking about and thinks that Finley is like a hit woman and offers her $50,000 to kill her husband. And what follows is this story of Finley Donovan and her babysitter accidentally killing a man. And it was funny at times, but the characters weren't really enjoyable. It's not a genre I normally read, and it wasn't for Cushy either. We both were just kind of there's a second book coming out, and both of us were like, I don't think I'm gonna read that. So I think I gave this 2 stars. It's not a bad book. It's a case of it just not being my preferred genre. So not a bad book. If it sounds like something you might be interested in, it was well written and you might like it. It's just not a book for me. Next up, I read Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. This is the first book in the Sun Eater series, which is an epic sci-fi series. And I gave this one 4 stars. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I'm going to have a dedicated review going up later this week. And this story follows Hadrian, who is telling his story from the present day. And he's telling it from beginning to end, essentially. And he starts out by saying that this story will end with him eating a sun and wiping out an entire alien race, as well as billions of humans. So from the get-go, you kind of have this perception of who Hadrian is, and he's just telling his story. It kind of has the trope of like unreliable narrator, and it is really, really well written. Christopher Rocchio's prose is so lovely. It's like almost flowery, but like not to the point where it's like distracting, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but he is incredible at prose. So again, not going to get too far into it because I'm going to be talking about it in that dedicated review. This was an incredible setup book for what I think is going to be a wild series. Next up, I have a reread, and that is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This book I read last year as an audiobook, and it actually, I think it was the year before last. And it absolutely wrecked me, ripped my heart out of my chest, stomped on it, and it did it again. Like, even knowing what was coming. I read it physically this time because I really wanted to like absorb the prose, and man, oh man, I picked up on a lot of things that I didn't my first time listening, and this book is just so wonderfully written. Her prose is also like phenomenal. It is so well developed. The storyline is kind of slow moving, but it just feels so gratifying every step of the way. You are rooting for Patroclus, you're rooting for Achilles, and you're kind of getting this view. The whole book is from Patroclus's point of view. And the end, the last like 20 or 30 pages, I just sobbed the whole time, even though I knew what was coming. The way Madeline Miller writes that ending is phenomenal. And the last 2 pages, I couldn't breathe. I was crying so hard. Like, this book is phenomenal. And if you're not into romance, if you're not into mythology retellings, like, I still implore you to give it a shot because you might like it just for the prose, but also for like the historical feeling. It talks about like the battle at Troy and everything. So it is very, very good, and it wrecks my soul every time. So I highly recommend. I know it's like a super hyped book and everyone talks about it, but for good reason. It is phenomenal. Next up, I have Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. This is the last book in the First Law trilogy. I just posted a dedicated review of this series. I will link that above. If you want to see my detailed thoughts on this entire series, go check that out. I gave this book 4 stars. It is a good book. Joe Abercrombie is a phenomenal author. His writing is very good, very dark, very dismal, it's grimdark, so that's good. But the series to me fell kind of flat. It was just, the whole grimdark tale felt so hopeless that by the end of it, I was just kind of like, okay. Like, the characters were all really apathetic, which kind of bled through into my feelings, and I was also feeling apathetic, and the way some of the character arcs came full circle just kind of like made me feel like, well, what was the point? I don't know. And I know that was the point, like the point was the hopelessness because it's grimdark, but I just think it didn't work for me, which is fine. So, not a bad book. I definitely understand why people love this series. The characters are phenomenal. Just some of the arcs kind of left me wanting, and the plot left me wanting. But the characters are so well written, so well developed. You really feel like you know them. And I understand that people love these characters, and that's why they love this series. So still continuing on with Joe Abercrombie, I think this, as a series, I gave this like 3.5 stars as like a full series. Really well written. I understand the direction it went in and why it went in that direction. It just wasn't really for me. So going to be reading Best Served Cold with Venus this month, whose channel I'll link below. She's incredible, reads a lot of fantasy. So we're going to be buddy reading Best Served Cold this month. So I'm continuing on with First Law because I really think that I will enjoy his other books, and I'm kind of a completionist. So I want to finish the First Law universe and then move on to his other books because I've heard great things about his other books, and I'm hoping that getting out of this world, maybe I will like some of his other works. So we will see. Next up, I read Piranesi by Susanna Clark. I gave this 4 stars. I buddy read this with RJ over at RJ Reads, whose channel I will link down below. This was a quick read for both of us. We both read it in like 2 days. It was a very weird, bizarre read. It follows this man named Piranesi who is living in this world of hallways and statues. and ever-changing tides that sweep through these hallways. And that's really the extent of his world. And he has traveled these hallways, he's documented all of this, and he's one of only 2 living people. And the other person, named the Other, meets him once or twice a week, just to kind of check on him and things. And he's always dressed really nice, and Piranesi doesn't know where he goes when they're not in meetings. So it's this kind of like bizarre world, and you don't know what's true and what's false. Piranesi is kind of like an unreliable narrator, only because he doesn't know what's going on. And it's just really weird. I understand why people like it. The ending was cool. Like the last 100 pages felt very fast paced, very fun. I liked it, I think. It was a book I'd like think about for a long time. Like, did I even like it? And I think I did. I did like it. It's just a really bizarre book, but a good book nonetheless. I recommend it. It's a quick read. It was like only 200 something pages, I think. It was very short. So good book, entertaining, weird. Next up, I have another weird book, and that's Nine Fox Gambit by Yoon-Ha Lee. I gave this 4 stars. I buddy read it with Kyle over on Read by Kyle. I'll link his channel down below. This book is a sci-fi book. Kyle didn't really like it, and I did like it. It's how to describe it? It's a weird book because there's a lot of terminology that is never explained. There's no glossary or anything, and a lot of the terminology are words that we use every day but mean something else in this world, and you just kind of have to use context clues and vibes to understand what's going on. Like for me, I felt like the whole book I was just like reading the vibes because I didn't really totally understand what was going on. It's a very militaristic book that follows this woman who has been genetically modified to work in formations. So her entire mindset is based on formations that she does with other people to enact this war. And she is chosen to basically have a dead person inhabit her, this old dead general who was one of the best generals ever, but lost it and killed a bunch of people. So he inhabits her, and they're like 2 people sharing one body, and they go and try to take back this basically like fortress. It's just really bizarre. The book is weird, but the last chunk, the last 10 or 15% of the book, I was so engrossed and I really enjoyed it. I've heard a lot of people say that it's not for them, and I get it because the book is weird. You don't totally know what's going on. And I think because of that, a lot of people kind of check out. Like they're just like, I don't know what's going on, so I don't really care. For me, I go into a lot of books kind of empty-headed anyway. So I was just like reading vibes. Like I was just like, the vibes are cool, and I really liked the 2 main characters. I think their names were Karis and Jadao, I think. They were great. And I think that the last bit of the book, the whole book was like a 3-star read for me until that last chunk, and then it went up to 4 stars. I think that it was really successful towards the end. I really liked where it went. So I do recommend this book, but I understand that it's not for everyone. I think I'm going to continue on with the series. It wasn't like a new favorite or anything. I just thought it was fun. So I do think I'm going to continue on with the series, but it's not going to be a high priority for me. Next up, I have a new release, and that is The Final Strife by Sarah El Arifi. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. I gave this one 4 stars. It's an adult fantasy book. It follows this world, country, empire, whatever, where there's this class system based on the color of your blood. So people with red blood are the top class because they can do this blood magic by creating runes with their blood. Then there are the blue bloods, I think their blood is blue. And they're like the working class. And then there's people with the clear blood, and they are the bottom of the bottom. When they are born, their hands and tongue are cut off, and they are basically just slaves. So this woman is part of the blue class. She's basically just trying to survive. She has a drug problem. She fights in fighting pits. And this story is kind of one of revolution. She ends up ingratiating herself into the castle, where she meets the daughter of one of the leaders or whatever, and has to train her how to fight through a wild series of events. And there's kind of like a sapphic romance, which is really fun. The story, the world is really great. The only downside, I think, was that while it is adult fantasy and it deals with a lot of adult themes and adult language, it definitely reads a little younger. It reads a little more, it's not YA, like it doesn't read YA, it just reads a little younger than like typical adult book. But I still really like the story. I'm really excited for the next one. I think this is a really successful debut. I think it's a debut. And I think that the characters are really fun. The ending, like that cliffhanger, I am itching for the next book because I think that the ending was wild. So I'm very excited to continue on with this series. I did really like it. I highly recommend for fans for people that are looking for something that is not like a typical adult fantasy. Next up, I have 2 books in the same series, and I read Age of Death and Age of Empire. I've already returned Age of Death, so I don't have the copy because it's a library book. These are the 5th and 6th books of the Legends of the First Empire series. This is the prequel series to the Reread Revelations and the Reread Chronicles. I think these are like 3,000 years ahead. Like, it's a super prequel, so it's a completely different story. So most people read those other series first and then read this, but I wanted to read it chronologically, which I almost think was to my detriment. I can't decide. I'll know for sure once I read those other series. So this series is basically about the legends that I believe are referenced in the Reread Chronicles and the Reread Revelations. And this series follows a whole host of characters. It starts in a very small town. There are these beings called the Frey, which are essentially elves. And they live a lot longer, they're stronger, they're faster, they're taller, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the Runes, which are humans, and they are weaker, they live shorter lives, all of that. And there's a certain tribe of the Frey that can do magic, and it's a very traditional fantasy world. And these books have been phenomenal. There's a lot of instances of having to make the tough choice that is right for the world and not necessarily right for the character. And they're beautiful. So Age of Death I gave 5 stars. This one I gave 4 stars. So the last 2 books kind of take a very fantastical turn. I don't want to give any spoilers. And yes, this is fantasy, but the direction the last 2 went in felt a little preachy almost. Like, it was very much so, like, almost like a parable, but I also understand that that's kind of what it's supposed to be, because these are the legends that people look up to. It's like the stories that people look up to in the future, so I get that to an extent. This last book, I think, had a lot of foreshadowing for those other series, which is why I'm wondering if I should have read them first. I know most people do, but I really wanted to read it chronologically. So a lot of the stuff that is foreshadowed in this book, I think, is going to happen in the next series, which might be better because I've gotten these hints, and so it might be fun for me to be like, oh, that's what they were talking about. So we'll see. The only reason I gave this one 4 stars is just because of that kind of like parable preachy kind of nature. It just felt very like almost like a children's tale, but with really, really, really dark themes, but like finding your inner self, like releasing old hurts and forgiving people. Like, I don't know. Still an incredible series. Michael J. Sullivan is one of my new favorite authors. This series is so good, especially the first 3 books. The first 3 books are phenomenal. The second 3 books, like the second set of 3 books, were written all as one huge book that he split into 3. They weren't intended to be part of the series at first. He just decided to write it later. So the first 3 feel like kind of one group, and then the second 3 are another group. The first 3 are phenomenal. And the second 3 are also phenomenal. I think the first 3 were a little more successful. Overall, incredible series, and I'm so excited to continue on with all of Michael J. Sullivan's books because they are amazing. Next up, I read The Lesser Devil by Christopher Rocchio. This is a novella that falls in between Empire of Silence and Howling Dark in the Sun Eater series. I gave this 3 stars. It was nice. It was from Crispin's point of view, who is Hadrian's brother, who is not on this mission with Hadrian, or he's not on this exploration with Hadrian. He is still on their home planet, and it's just kind of like an interesting perspective because you get to see kind of how Hadrian is an unreliable narrator, and you get to see Hadrian from Crispin's point of view as opposed to from his own point of view, because all of the Sun Eater is written in first person perspective from Hadrian's point of view. So it was interesting to see how somebody else perceives Hadrian. And the way that the like adventure that Crispin goes on was really interesting to kind of see more nods to like old Earth and stuff. I thought that was really cool. So I really enjoyed the novella for like the kind of different point of view we got. The story was just a little boring, but I really did like seeing Hadrian from Crispin's point of view. Last but not least, I read The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. I listened to this as an audiobook. I gave this like 3 to 4 stars, somewhere in there. I haven't decided yet, but this is the first book in the Lightbringer series. It is a series where the magic system is basically like you can use light and color to create different magic, and different people can access different colors of magic. And basically you like channel that color to create a physical object. And there are people that can do multiple colors, there's people that can just do one color, and then there's prisms who can do all colors. It follows a whole host of characters. I really liked the prose and I really liked the characters. Everything felt very fun. I wasn't like super duper invested. That's why I said it's like between 3 and 4. But I am excited to continue. I'm very nervous for the series because I've heard the last book really bungles it and that it's not very good. So I'm really nervous, but also really excited because I did like this one and I liked the characters a lot. So I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Overall, good book, just very nervous. So I think I'm trying to like temper my expectations. Anyway, that is all the books I read in July. What a good month. Which is great because in August I'm worried I'm not going to get to read this month because there's like 8 days towards the end of the month where I will be traveling, going back to Texas to see some family, driving my mother-in-law because she's moving, driving her like 12 hours, and then spending some time with my sister-in-law and her new baby. So it's going to be a busy week, so I probably won't get a whole lot of reading done that week. So glad I kind of read a lot this month to kind of make up for not reading as much next month. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down below what is the best book you read in July, and if any of these books are ones that you also loved. If you really like my content, please hit the notification bell to be notified every time I post new videos. As always, your support means the world to me, and until next time, thanks guys.